Thank you for coming today to this program, Cybersecure My Business. My name is Megan, and I'm a librarian here at Arlington Heights Memorial Library. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight, Lisa Plaggemier. And did I say that right?
Perfectly.
Oh, great. Oh. All right. Lisa Plaggemier is Executive Director at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. She is a recognized thought leader in security awareness and education with a proven track record of engaging and empowering people to protect themselves, their families, and their organizations. Lisa has held leadership roles with the Ford Motor Company, CDK, InfoSec, and MediaPro. She is a University of Michigan graduate. Go Blue! And while she wasn't born in Austin, Texas, she got there as fast as she could. So please welcome Lisa. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Let's get started. So we're going to talk about what it is we're protecting when it comes to small businesses and cybersecurity. The National Cybersecurity Alliance, if you haven't heard of us, we have a whole bunch of free materials. We're a nonprofit, we're partially federally funded, and then funded by a lot of great companies that help us do our mission. So one of our programs is called Cybersecure My Business, just like the name of the series from the library. And it's a small business education program. So what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is some of the information that we've gathered from that program. We also are the inventors of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So if you've heard of that every October and you get a little tired of it like we do, by the end of October, you have us to blame because we're the founders of that 20 years ago now. So I want to talk a little bit about what it is we're protecting and just how important small and medium-sized businesses are to the overall U.S. economy. 44% of GDP, 99.9% of all U.S. businesses are actually small businesses. Half of all the employees in the U.S. work for a small business, almost 62 million workers. 50% of all small businesses start at home. So this is kind of what it's all about. This is the American dream. You start a small business in your garage, go out on your own, take some risks, and if you're successful, you reap the rewards and move on up in life. It's the American dream. It's fundamental to our democracy, to capitalism, to our way of life. Unfortunately, a threat to small businesses is a threat to our entire economy. If you get a cold, the whole country gets the flu, I'm afraid. Now, I often hear small businesses say, I don't have anything that's worth it to a hacker or to a cyber criminal. I'm too small to be a target. How are they even going to know who I am? I don't have deep pockets. Won't they go after bigger companies that have deep pockets? Well, unfortunately, this is some of what you're up against here. And those four flags in the middle represent the four countries that actually perpetrate most of the cybercrime. They work in Russia, for example. They work in conjunction with the government or with government approval. Same thing in China. So it's Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran that are doing most of the damage. Smaller companies are actually easier to hack than larger companies. Larger companies, have a lot more security measures in place. And so it can be a little bit more of a slog for the cyber criminals. So if you look at the slide here, 51% of SMBs have no cybersecurity measures in place at all. So you're a little bit of a softer target, actually. Your employees have to defend 350% more social engineering attacks than in larger companies. So that means things like phishing emails or people calling and just trying to defraud your business. 65% of all cyber attacks are aimed at the US. We are the most attacked people in the world, according to a couple of different data sources. 46% of breaches impact companies with fewer than 1,000 employees. So please don't think that you're too small, that the bad guys aren't going to know who you are. 37% of ransomware victims. Ransomware has been really big business for cyber criminals and nation states over the last couple of years. 37% of the victims have fewer than 100 employees. Unfortunately, we just learned lately, it's been in the news, that most of the North Korean defense program is funded with ransomware from the US. So really heartbreaking. 1 of every 323 emails that your employees get is malicious. So not exactly a great story here. If you do business with China, in China, you have suppliers in China, you have any relationship at all with China, I want you to be aware of what the potential risks are there. And the short-term gain might not be worth potential long-term pain. So this link that's on here will provide the deck will be available as a PDF. So just give a listen to that story on NPR, or you can read the transcript. I won't go into detail about it now. As you can see, it's been in the news, cybersecurity and small businesses. You don't have to look very far. This is in the headlines regularly. I think if you're watching this right now, then that means that you understand that there is a threat here potentially to your livelihood. So I want to thank you for attending. 87% of small businesses have data that could be compromised and attacked. So what do bad guys want? They want money and things they can turn into money. And the thing that they're most likely to turn into money is data, especially personally identifying data of you and your employees, or very often, especially in the case of China, it's intellectual property. So if you do something really special, highly specialized, it took a lot of research and you spent a lot of years developing your product, then that intellectual property is worth it to somebody who might want to use that. And there was one highly publicized story of a medium-sized business had their intellectual property, the plans for the products that they built, stolen by the Chinese. The Chinese spun up a company to compete against them, and eventually the U.S. company went out of business because they could undercut them so much, and they didn't have to spend any time on research. They just stole their way to it. So how do they turn data into money? This is a look at the dark web, the value of data that's on the dark web. So you can see that any one piece of these, a Visa card number with a PIN is worth $20. Banking login is worth $65. But as you complete a more a fuller picture of somebody and you get more bits and pieces of data that make up their complete identity, then the price shoots up to $1,170. This is a lot easier than robbing a bank in person. The risk is much, much lower for them to steal data and to be able to sell it on the dark web in the comfort of their own home. So just remember, what they're looking for isn't just money, but it's also things they can turn into money. Right now, the latest estimate I saw was that this is a $1.5 billion market. This has actually dropped a little bit over the last year or so. There's more data for sale. There have been more data breaches, so it's supply and demand. And then, so that's brought down supply. Too much supply has actually brought down the price or the value. And then one of the big dark web markets was taken down by global law enforcement. These are big cases that involve like the FBI or the Secret Service, Interpol, and then local law enforcement in the countries where they're able to track down some of these bad actors. We're still looking at about $6 trillion in damages to the global economy. So this is an enormous tax that we're all paying for the price of this. So if you've got consumer records in your business, if you've got, for example, I used to work with car dealers that would have Social Security numbers and driver's license numbers in their database, and the average dealer would have 50,000 of those consumer records. So you multiply that by the numbers that you see on the screen, and that's real money. So you're absolutely worth something to a hacker. The other thing that's happened here is this is really developed as a business. So it's not, one criminal in their basement somewhere. It's or very, very highly organized crime, sometimes together with nation state actions. So they've learned to treat this just like you and I would treat a business. They outsource things that don't make sense for them to do in-house. So if their scam involves some sort of call center, outbound calls or inbound calls from victims, then they might partner with another criminal who runs a call center that helps to perpetrate those scams. Ransomware as a service. You don't have to be a coder who has written your own ransom program. You can buy it from somebody else. You can pay them to lodge the attack on the victim, and then you split the profits. A DDoS, that's a distributed denial of service attack. That's flooding your website with so much traffic that it crashes. $5 an hour. Made me realize that a disgruntled customer could go online on the dark web and hire somebody for $5 an hour to try to take down your website. Breaking into an email account, you can hire somebody to do that for $90. I have seen small businesses that have had some sort of network compromise. Bad actors get access to their email accounts. And then what they use your email account to do is to send out phishing emails, for example, to everybody that's in your contact database. So maybe your customers, your suppliers, things like that. So they'll use it to try and defraud other people. And then the full package deal, access to company devices and accounts and the data that you need, $1,800. It's called organized crime for a reason. This is the new mob. This is what it looks like. As I said, really, really highly organized, partnering with other organizations for operational efficiencies. They view this as a job, just like you and I do. It's just that their intent, their malicious intent is what separates them from us. This is basically what, if you think about like an Amazon page on the dark web. So this is credit card numbers for sale for €7.95 each. The one you see in the middle there. You'll notice on the right that they have star ratings for stealth and quality and communication. So they actually rate each other. You know, if I buy stolen credit card numbers from you, I'm going to give you a rating just like we would in the legitimate world on Amazon or something. I'm sure there are a lot of businesses that would kill for those 5-star ratings, but it's kind of it's almost laughable that, but the problem is it's not a joke. They offer money back guarantees. So the language you see here was actually posted on the dark web. This is an ad that a criminal posted, but I mocked it up to look like a old school newspaper ad. Whatever happened to there's no honor amongst thieves? I mean, they're actually giving each other money back guarantees. So if I steal credit card numbers and sell them on the dark web, and somebody finds that they've already been reported as fraud or something like that, the numbers have already been shut down, then I'm likely to get a money back guarantee from a bad guy. These guys have LinkedIn profiles that make them sound like legitimate businessmen or legitimate software developers. It's a problem, but it is a very, very highly evolved, highly organized marketplace. So enough doom and gloom. What do we do about all this now? Now that I'm going to give you nightmares. So there's people in security like to refer to security as a three-legged stool. We've got people, process, and technology. Thing is, the technology has to be purchased and installed and configured by people, and processes are carried out by people. So I think it's actually really all people, even though it's a three-legged stool. People play a really important role. And so I'm going to talk to you tonight about some of the things you can do that are incredibly inexpensive, sometimes free, that have to do with this people element, but really, really, really go a long way in protecting your business. So as I said, a lot of it involves human beings. Unfortunately, we're all fallible. And when you hear about security incidents or data breaches in the news, there is some type of human error along the way, usually a couple human errors that will lead to something bad happening. You've got well-intentioned people that just make a mistake. That happens to all of us. Maybe they've been tricked by a bad guy. They fell for a fraud or something. I don't believe in victim shaming. It's the bad guys who are bad, not those of us who just make a simple mistake. But then you also potentially have malicious employees, bad people doing bad things. So the technology is critical, but it doesn't solve all the problems, because so much of the problems we have in security today are related to human error. All these logos that you see on your screen right now, these were all big data breaches that happened over the last decade that all started with one particular human error that is the cause of a lot of bad things. It was people that clicked on phishing emails. And you might think, who's going to fall for the Nigerian prince email? The problem is they're not Nigerian prince emails, and they're much more well done now, well crafted, with graphic artists doing the layouts and native English speakers editing them, so they don't stick out as much as they used to. They're super clever. They used to be super obvious, and they're just not anymore. So think about somebody being able to find maybe the name of your office manager or your controller or something on your website or on LinkedIn. Maybe they've got one email address for your business, so they take a guess at the naming convention, the email convention for that other person's email address, or maybe their email address is posted publicly. They're going to target maybe the folks in your business that have access to your bank account, or the ones that the person who cuts the checks. And with everything we share now on social media, it's really easy to figure out, like, okay, who might I want to target in a business to infect their computer with malware, like keylogging malware or something like that, or I want to perpetrate some other kind of scam on them, like if I can send them an email that looks like one from a vendor and tell them I've taken them to pay an invoice that was supposed to go someplace else, then those are the kinds of things they're trying to do. So the main thing here is to train your employees. And this is what I said is very inexpensive to do. And there's some really good training out there that's completely free. So training them to be alert for phishing emails, how to recognize a phishing email, how to recognize a malicious URL. So a web address that doesn't look quite right. This is an example of a phishing email that came into a company where I used to work, and it's a few years old, but I still use it because the tactic was a really good one. The bad guys are still using this particular tactic, and it's really hard to recognize, and something you need to train your employees on. So this came from a car dealer, came from the CFO of a car dealership, from his legitimate sender address. So there was no spoofed address at the top, and it came to one of our salespeople. Now, if you're a salesperson and you get a DocuSign email, chances are you're going to click on it. This is a good thing. My contract's getting signed. I'm going to close my deal. So he clicked on it. And luckily we had technology in place to keep him from going to the site it was trying to send him to. It was trying to send him to a fake DocuSign email website that was just there to capture his username and password. I asked him if he was expecting, the salesperson who clicked on this, I said, were you expecting a DocuSign from this customer? And he said, no, I was actually expecting an attachment, a PDF attachment of the signed contract. So really that little difference there of what he was expecting and what he got should have been the thing that set off his spidey senses. And he probably should have picked up the phone and called the CFO at the number he knew to be his, not the number in the email, but the number he knew to be the customer's phone number. The DocuSign logo, if you hover over that would have looked a little bit strange, the URL there. But if you're on your phone, that can be harder to do. You have to have a little more patience to figure out what the link is. So if he was moving fast on his phone, like a lot of us do, then he probably missed that. How does this happen? How do you end up getting a phishing email from a legitimate sender address? Well, in this case, the car dealership had a network compromise. And so when cyber criminals get access to email accounts, they're not in there, like the hacker in the hoodie, just reading our emails one by one. They don't care. They don't have time for that. They're going to use auto forwarding rules and email filters. And as quickly as they can, they're going to find email threads where they can jump in and send a phish that looks contextually appropriate. So this email looks so close to what the salesperson was expecting that he clicked on it. So really getting people to slow down just a little bit, check links before they click on them. Something isn't quite what they were expecting, even if it's from a known sender, somebody that they trust, it's probably better to pick up the phone and call. In fact, 72% of us, sometimes very often, or always reach out to a person to verify if a message seems a little unusual. This is based on research that we did this year with 7,000 people in 7 different countries, from age 18 all the way through retirees. 70% of us also very often are always checked for phishing. So really good habit to have in your business. And remember to create a culture where it's okay to report these things, right? You'd rather have your employees tell you something doesn't look quite right If they click on something they shouldn't and then realize, ooh, that might not have been good, it's better for them to tell you right away. So you want to create a culture of where it's okay to report things. It's okay to make a mistake. The most important thing is that you tell somebody. So I mentioned all the different things that people touch that are cybersecurity related, all the different things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to human beings. So some of us hopefully do background checks. And it can also be useful to do a credit report. There's a lot of places where we still do drug testing. I know that's changed in different parts of the country, but really important to do all those checks before you hire somebody. And then what do your new hire onboarding processes look like? Do employees have to sign non-disclosure agreements? Do you have written policies and procedures? So do employees know, does everybody get access to everything? Or do you try and restrict access to data, only the data that the employee needs to actually do their jobs? Do you have rules for behavior, acceptable use of technology type policy? Do you have rules for how long and how complex passwords have to be? What's acceptable as far as social media usage, posting on behalf of the company, who can do that? Training access. Are you going to make employees take regular phishing training or any security training? Is it once a year? Is it once a quarter? You need policies on all those things. And of course, I used to work for 2 different training vendors. I can tell you that what's most effective is short training more frequently instead of having somebody sit down and do like an hour's worth once a year. So all those kinds of policies and procedures, having those written down and making sure that people are aware when they onboard, and then they get regular reminders. So maybe they have to acknowledge your policies on an annual basis, something like that. Other things to think about. Is it okay to open attachments in an email from somebody that you don't know? Just those kinds of things where bad things can happen. You're going to want to have policies around those so that employees realize that you're really all trying to protect the business. So as I said, we surveyed 6,000 people this year. We asked them about these behaviors, and some of these are really, really key to your business. So as we talk about human beings here, I want to talk about some of these. We asked them about their password habits, using multi-factor authentication, installing updates, checking for phishing, and backing up data. So when it came to passwords, we asked people about their typical length. So most people are using pretty short passwords. The problem here is, and the federal advice just changed actually to be, instead of over 12, they're now recommending like 16 to 18 character passwords. Why is length so important? Again, it's not a hacker in a hoodie trying to just figure out your passwords, right? Typing away. It is a hacker with a software cracking tool. So they're using software to crack your password. The shorter it is, the faster it is to crack. So you want to have some rules in place. When your employees have access to different things, they have passwords, you're going to want them to have long passwords. Think about passphrases. Those are a really good tip to try and use, like lines from your favorite songs or favorite movie, something like that. Those are much harder to crack because you can make them longer and still be able to remember them. The other thing that's important is uniqueness. The passwords can't all be the same, and everybody needs to have their own, and they need to be using more than one. What happens is we fall in love with one password and we use it over and over again. We really need to be using completely unique passwords for every account. Why does this matter? Why can't I just think up one long complex password and use that on everything, or maybe just change a few characters here and there? Well, before I came to work in cybersecurity, a few years before, Yahoo had a giant data breach of usernames and passwords. And I thought, who cares? I haven't used my Yahoo account in a really long time. I bet that's true for a lot of people. If you're like me and you have a few gray hair and we're getting online in the 90s with your AOL dial-up and your modem, you probably had a Yahoo account. It was ubiquitous. A bunch of us had Yahoo accounts. I haven't logged on to mine in a really long time. So when that breach happened, I just thought, I don't have anything of value in there. The bad guy has access to my Yahoo account. They can have at it. I just didn't care. I didn't think it mattered. What I came to realize later, after I went to work in security, is that, again, they're using software tools to do these things. So they know that we have this bad habit of reusing passwords. So they're going to take a password stolen in one breach and try it against all accounts. They don't even have to know where we have accounts because they're using technology to do this at scale. So they can just try those credentials on a bunch of websites. And then they also know that we just like to change a few characters here and there, like swap out numbers and letters, or maybe add a few numbers at the end or an exclamation point or whatever. And so they have software that can cycle through all those different iterations and try those on every account across the web. So you say, okay, Lisa, I get it. I can't use the same password twice and they all have to be super long and completely unique. How am I supposed to remember all these things? Well, we ask people that in our research, and unfortunately, a lot of them tell us that they write them down in a password notebook. So if you're walking around your business and you see people with a password notebook or Post-it notes with passwords written on them, that's really not a good idea. What we recommend instead is that you have one password manager that you purchase for your business, and everybody uses that password manager. If on occasion people need to share passwords with each other for whatever reason, somebody goes on leave or something, and you need access to something, this is the most secure way for folks to share passwords with other people. You can read Tom's Guide or Consumer Reports or PC Mag to see what the reviews say to help you pick one. But by and large, they're using strong encryption, something called zero knowledge architecture, which means the employees of these companies can't see your passwords. If you use these together with multi-factor authentication and a really long, complex password on the password manager itself, then we really like these solutions. Some of them will include things like dark web monitoring. So they'll tell you if your employees' passwords are for sale on the dark web. They'll tell you if you're using the same password in on too many accounts, or you're using one that's too hackable, too short. So the next leg of the stool is process. Again, this is very tightly related to people because it's people who execute your processes. Access controls, I mentioned earlier, who gets access to what? Who can access your CRM system? Who has the ability to post on behalf of your business on your social media account? What access do you give third parties? I have seen small businesses where they want to do business with somebody who has a solution that's going to help them in some way. And they ask for access to your network. They ask for access to your CRM. They ask for the keys to the kingdom, data-wise. So then what you're doing is you're relying on them to be secure because now they've got access to your data. So this is what happened to Target. Their giant hack years ago was done through their HVAC vendor. Their HVAC vendor had network access so that they could control the temperature in their stores. But unfortunately, they didn't have a partition network. It was a flat network. And so once somebody got in through the HVAC system into Target's network, they were able to get to credit card numbers. So not a good scenario there. So you really have to know who you're working with when it comes to third parties you do business with. Passwords, we've talked about that. Uniqueness, complexity, length, really important. Verification, how are you going to know who has access and what they're accessing and when they're accessing it? If you suddenly see people logging onto a system in your business at 3 a.m. and you don't have anybody who should be doing that, that's maybe a sign that that something's amiss. So making sure you have good identity and access management is critical. And then offboarding. So we think a lot about onboarding when people join our business. We don't necessarily think about anything more than maybe getting their keys to the store when they leave, but making sure that you knew everything that they had access to so that you could revoke those credentials. It's not just, a laptop and a cell phone and the keys. But did they have the ability to post on social media for the business, or access to email, access to CRM, access to every other system that they had access to? So really important that that all gets revoked. And the only way you can revoke it all is if you knew to begin with what they had access to. So it's important to keep track of all that. I'll give you an example of poor practices when it comes to revoking access. You want to do it within minutes of the person leaving, not hours or days. So because I came from the automotive world, I've got an example here of a couple of employees who had access to a thing called the dealership management system. It's a thing that runs the car dealership, their main system of record. They went down the street to work for another car dealer, and they use their old usernames and passwords to sign on to the dealership system of their previous employer. Now that's illegal. Even if your credentials haven't been revoked, if you're logging on to something you shouldn't have access to, even if you do, that's a problem. That's illegal. In this case, in this state at the time, the statute said that the damages had to be worth more than $5,000. It cost over $5,000 to get the forensic evidence just to go to court. Without that, this could have been dismissed, because just saying somebody accessed my system is not enough. You've got to have the digital evidence that shows. But I definitely recommend that make sure you're on top of your identity and access management, particularly when people leave your employ. Then when it comes to technology, we could do a whole talk just on the technology alone. It's the firewalls and antivirus and making sure all your systems are up to date, that you're operating on the latest operating systems. Do you have a virtual private network, which means if employees are working from a coffee shop or from home, or they're traveling on business, using that VPN means it's just like they're under your roof using your actual network in the business. Backups are incredibly important to be able to recover from a ransomware incident. Content filters. Should people be able to get to porn sites when they're at work? No, then you need to make sure that those are blocked at the proxy, things like that. And then having your laptops encrypted and any sensitive data, personally identifying information should be encrypted. A lot of businesses use a managed security services provider to do a lot of these things, but a lot of this stuff is related to those processes that we talked about earlier. And so there are policy decisions that you need to make, and then you need to train employees on those things. So you can hire a managed services provider. I recommend it for most SMBs, but it doesn't, they're not going to completely take over all the risk for your business. You still have some responsibilities, some things you need to do. Now, I mentioned multi-factor authentication earlier, and if you don't do anything else as a result of this presentation but one thing, I would ask that you prioritize multi-factor authentication. This is really, really important. This is the thing you have to do to log on to your bank account, right? When you go to log on, you know your password, but then they are also going to text you a PIN or email you a PIN or a code, or maybe you're using push notifications to an authenticator app on your phone. Those are my favorite, especially used with biometrics. Those make it really, really quick and easy to be more secure. What MFA means is that if somebody has your password, you're using one that's too weak, or it's for sale on the dark web, or it's been involved in a breach, if they have your password, they can't get into your account without that second factor. It is critically important that for every application, every piece of technology, every account that you use in your business, that you have multi-factor authentication on there, including, CRM. Bank accounts are absolutely critical. If you're using a financial services institution that doesn't mandate or offer MFA, my advice is you get a new bank. It's really, really that important. So many of us are using weak passwords that this helps to save us from ourselves, kind of a belt and suspenders approach. We ask in our research if people knew what MFA was and if they're still using it. You might have your employees do an eye roll when you tell them, hey, we're all going to use MFA on everything from now on, because they'll think, oh, that's that extra step and I don't want to have to do that. But the good news here is after we get over that initial moan and groan and frustration, that the vast majority of us keep using it. We get used to it. We find really quick and easy ways to use it. Like I mentioned, push notifications to an authenticator app on your phone. Those are super simple and really fast. We also ask people in our research about their feelings about cybersecurity, because we know that this influences your motivation to do things. A lot of people are intimidated by this stuff. And hopefully this presentation I'm giving you today is plain spoken enough that I didn't use any intimidating language, because that's not my intent at all. The problem is when you find something intimidating, you usually avoid it. So rather than taking some of these simple steps like long passwords, password managers, MFA, some of the process steps like having policies and training your employees on phishing, these things aren't hard. They do take some time and effort, but they're not difficult. When you find things intimidating, you avoid it. So you might not do some of those things that actually aren't intimidating to do. It's just that the whole topic of cybersecurity can be intimidating. I blame him. I blame the hacker in the hoodie image. There's been too much FUD, too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt used to talk about cybersecurity, and that keeps a lot of us from doing some really simple behaviors that go a really long way in protecting your business. There's also a lot of worry out there. The Americans worry a little bit more than the Canadians and the Brits, but there's a lot of us are very worried about being victims of cybercrime. And I also don't think this is a good motivator for behavior change. We asked people again about these behaviors. Did training cause them to change any of their behavior? So we asked them, as a result of training that you've taken at work, have you done any of these things? And we were really, really impressed with the results, that so many people got better at recognizing phishing, started using better passwords, started using multi-factor authentication. We just found this super, super encouraging. So training, one of the cheapest things you can do, and is also very effective. So a great place for small businesses to start is something called the NIST 5-step approach. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but if you work with a security consultant, it's entirely possible that they might take you through this same sort of process where you identify the assets that you need to protect. What in your business is worth something to somebody who's malicious? Is it data? Is it money? Is it inventory? What is it? Is it intellectual property? Is it just the way you do things because you're really good at it and somebody else wants to know how you do them? And then what are you going to do to protect those assets? Detect is, how are you going to know that something's at risk? Like you've had a network compromise or you have some security issue. How are you going to know that that's happening? That usually involves technology. Sometimes your employees will report things to you. Something doesn't look quite right. So it's very important to know if something has gone wrong. And then respond. This is something that you have to practice, basically. The only way to know if you're prepared for a ransomware attack is to have a response plan and then be able to practice that plan. Some small businesses around the country that are really good at being able to respond to an emergency, they're in the snow belt, and they've had to figure out ways to conduct business even when there's 3 feet of snow outside or a giant snowstorm. Hurricane belts in the country. I've worked with car dealers in Texas, for example, that are really, really good at knowing how to conduct their business. If cell phones go out, power goes out, there's a flood, they have figured out ways with pen and paper and to still make sure that they can, for example, service first responder vehicles. Really, really important. So it's a lot like planning for any other sort of disaster, planning for things like any security incident or like a ransomware incident. And then how do you recover from that? How do you recover from brand damage? How do you recover from, if any of your customers' data was affected? There's laws now in place in different states where you have to inform your customers, and you only have a very short time window when you have to do that. Hey, we've had a security incident. We've had some kind of data breach. So you got to be able to regain customer trust after those things and figure out, what am I going to do differently as a business to make sure this doesn't happen again? How am I going to prevent future incidents? So I talked about having a written plan, an incident response plan if something does go wrong. Make sure that's printed out somewhere. If your power goes out or you get ransomware, you're not going to be able to access that plan on a computer. So really important to think about. Having experts, I mentioned having a managed security services provider, having experts that you can rely on. You're also going to want to know who your local FBI and or US Secret Service offices are. Like who are they? Who are those people by name? If you do have something like a ransomware attack, you're going to want to call the local Secret Service office. It's better to know who that person is in advance instead of trying to figure out, who do I call the FBI while my hair is on fire because all my computers are down because I've got ransomware. So consider federal law enforcement some of the experts that you're going to need to rely on, but make sure you have those people in advance. You don't want to wait until you absolutely need them in an emergency to know who they are. Your goal here isn't that you're never ever going to have any issues with cybersecurity. Your goal is to bounce back if it happens. resilience is the most important thing, because it's really a situation of not if, it's when, unfortunately, because this has gotten so common. So you want to be able to manage it well, come out of it with as little damage as possible, and stay in business. That's the goal. Security is a process. It is not an event. This isn't something you can go do once and it's static and it's fine and you're done. This is something you have to manage, just like you manage your accounts, your finances, you manage your customer support. You have to manage security on a regular basis. It's a living, breathing thing. It's not a one-time thing. It can be really helpful to have a champion in your business, in addition to yourself. So it might be somebody like a CIO or a CFO. And then, obviously you need somebody who's accountable and can drive change through your business to make sure some of these processes and policies get implemented. So you need to give them the authority as well as the responsibility to get it done. So I don't want you guys to think about that hacker in a hoodie image and all that scary stuff I talked about at the beginning. I want you to think about, some of the things that we talked about, the people, process, technology. A lot of this is people and process, and it's absolutely doable. So I want you to feel empowered. Education should be empowering at the end of the day. When I showed you that graph of how many people actually use their training to make some changes to protect their business, 92% of the people in that study did something. Only 8% of people didn't do anything at all. So education is empowering. It can instill people to make some behavior changes, to use longer passwords, to use password managers, to use multi-factor authentication. So rather than thinking about that hacker in a hoodie, I want you to think about the peace of mind you can have if you do some of these things. Years ago, I had a hotel points program that was completely wiped out. I woke up one morning to see that my hundreds of thousands of points were gone. And I called them and they were able to scrape them back before they got turned into gift cards and mailed to a cyber criminal. But shortly after that, they offered multi-factor authentication to their customers. And I got to tell you, once I turned MFA on all my accounts, I sleep better. I don't worry that I'm going to wake up in the morning with that panic feeling that all my miles and my points or my cash is gone. So there's definitely some peace of mind to be had here. So rather than worrying about this, better to do some things about it, even some really simple things like MFA, and you'll sleep better at night. So we have lots of resources for you, your family, and your business at staysafeonline.org. As I said, we're a nonprofit that's partially funded by the Department of Homeland Security. And we have all kinds of, especially webinars and recorded webinars for small businesses from our Cybersecure My Business program. But we also have materials to help you talk to your kids about things like cyberbullying, or to help if you're like me and you're trying to help your aging parents stay safe online. We have content that can help you do that. Any questions about technology, we have lots of plain spoken advice on our website. And that is it for me tonight.